All right, let's get into it here. Man, I don't know, feeling a little low energy to be doing this, but I think part of that is based on the day we just saw. The NHL Trade Deadline, kind of a buzzkill. Not a whole lot going on, and certainly some of that would have to do with what my team did, and we'll get into that. We'll get into what went on around the rest of the league. We'll get into what the Sens did, but it was quiet. I'm not sure we still really need these 7-8 hour marathon shows when no action really takes place until like the final hour. Now, I guess it doesn't really matter. You can have those shows if you want. I'm not sure we all still need to watch 7 or 8 hours of trade deadline coverage, but maybe it was just one bad year, right? Some new rules in terms of cap retention and the playoff salary cap. I don't know. People are throwing around a lot of series. It was just a dull day and not a lot going on. I should say, if you were waiting today to hear from Joshua O'Connor for part 3 of that conversation, we've been getting some cool feedback on that. People really like Joshua. I really like Joshua. He's an easy guy to talk to. The conversation goes in all kinds of different places. We will get to part 3 on another day. I left today vacant for this, thinking there would be plenty of NHL trade deadline stuff to discuss. For those of you who've been here for a while, you'll recall last year there was 3 episodes of the podcast coming out of the NHL trade deadline because it had been that busy. We did one on the Ottawa Senators and what they had got done. We did one on the Leafs and what they had got done because both teams had been reasonably busy on the deadline, and the rest of the day still had enough other interesting moves that we threw down a third one that was just, okay, now let's get to the rest of the league. Today, like I said, I left vacant. We're going to push the 3rd episode of the Joshua series so that we could do this. It barely warrants one. You can probably hear it in my voice. Like, I'm just not really... I sat out there and I'm taking notes on a couple things, and I'm just sort of scrolling through a couple of different articles and looking for stats and anything to make this kind of, feel like it was a bigger day than it was. And it just ain't out there, man. So one show on this year's trade deadline as opposed to the 3 last time, which I grant you, 3 was overkill. There's barely enough here today for 1, so I wouldn't count on this lasting long. As we hit a 6.8% Ransack the Universe West Coast IPA. We'll get to the dumb motherfucker who has been ransacking my team in a few minutes. Let's start with the Senators, because I think I was a little unfair to the Sens on Thursday evening when they made their biggest move in bringing in Warren Foegele. The guy's been around for a while. There's something about that name. I think I said on Twitter, it reminds me of some nerd that Zach Morris and AC Slater would have bullied into doing their homework for them while Screech was locked in a locker somewhere at Bayside. I said I probably wouldn't have made the David Perron deal just to bring in Warren Foegele, because that's sort of what happened. I know it happened the other way around, and we did get a little bit of feedback on whether or not, you can make the Perron deal because he'd already traded for his replacement. And at the time on Thursday evening, having not given it enough thought, having not done enough research in the moment, you're just shooting from the hip on Twitter like people so often are. So I just didn't think it was necessary. I think when you get to the playoffs, I would prefer David Perron. And I think this year, if nothing else, assuming Perron gets back in the lineup here over the next week or two healthy, I think I'd still believe that. He was pretty good in the playoffs for the Sens last year against the Leafs. I believe he had the big game 5, I believe. Yeah. And so it just seemed like a lot of shuffling for not a whole lot of upside. I get it. Once you bring in Warren Foegele, do you need David Perron? Perhaps not. But given the choice between the two of them healthy for a playoff run, which we're not certain yet that the Sens are going to have, although it is looking better and better every day, I would have taken David Perron this year. But when you dive into it a little bit, it's certainly relevant that Warren Foegele is significantly younger. I believe he's 29, and obviously David Perron, 36 or 37, I believe. So I get that, certainly. And he's $500,000 cheaper, and you have him for one more year. So there's a lot more working in Warren Fogel's... Got to stop saying his name. Makes me chuckle. There's a lot more working in his favor than I was giving credit for. I was more just sort of... I don't even know what the word... I was going to say disappointed. It's not my team. I don't care. Trade away whoever you want. I'd be over the moon if you would start trading away your best players, which David Perron certainly is not. I thought he was going to be a better fit in Ottawa than he turned out to be. And he himself commented on that on deadline day on the way out the door going, you know what? I thought that maybe they never really found a great fit for me in Ottawa. And I thought that was reasonable enough. Earlier on, I would have said that's how I felt about Zetterlund. And yet the further we get into this, less and less convinced it's that they can't find a fit for him. It's that he's not producing. But that was a guy a year ago on trade deadline day I thought was a great pickup for the Sens. And it has not turned out. And sometimes it's nobody's fault. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. And Perron this year, he's, like we said, he's getting up there a little bit. He's been hurt. And you're not quite sure at that age what he's going to look like moving forward. So, if I were to backpedal a little bit, I was probably, and I don't even think I roasted them for it. I just said I would have kept Perron around. And if your counter argument to that was, well, they already replaced him with Warren Foegele earlier in the day, fair enough. I guess he'll drop into the middle six somewhere. I'm seeing some people trying to push Warren Foegele into the second line, and maybe that drops Ridley Greig back down. There's a few different things you can do here, but what's he on pace for? 9 goals this year? It hasn't been a good year for him. He is better than that, and I'm sure they're hoping that they'll unlock something here, and he'll be excited to be, in a new environment and all of that stuff. The grass is greener and fresh start and all of those sorts of things. They could apply. But I think if you are banking on him, and I'm not suggesting the Senators are, but if as a fan you're banking on that guy being a top 6 slam dunk, that could be disappointing for you. Certainly a very capable third line player. And I imagine he'll get a little bit of a boost out of, the fresh start. Sometimes it's just a jolt to the system. Wasn't really working for him in LA. So we'll see. But I would imagine this is more of a third-line fit than a second-line fit. Could always be proven wrong, but he's not exactly having a great year thus far. And so I don't see any real reason to expect him to drop in and suddenly fit in the top 6. But you never know. New line mates, new chemistry. You see who he clicks with, and you go from there. But not a bad pickup. And certainly he didn't give up a ton to get him. I don't know what else I expected from the Senators. Really not much, I guess. I think we've talked about it on the show, certainly online. I wouldn't have done much if I was Ottawa, just because I thought it was going to be hard enough to climb back into the playoffs. At the time we last spoke, I believe Ottawa was 5 points out. They are now 4 points out, and that is with having been on a hell of a run. Were they points in 11 of the last 12 games, 12 of the last 13 games, whatever it's been. Man, it takes time. It's so hard to make up ground. So I believe what I said, what I wouldn't have sold, but I probably wouldn't have bought either. You leave these guys the runway to see if as a group they can get it done and get in, and that's great. You don't cut their wings off, and start selling pieces when you're that close. But I wouldn't have spent a lot to buy. And that is essentially what happened. They swapped out Perron for Foegele, and that's fine. But they didn't sell off a bunch of pieces, but they didn't, go and buy either. But it did sound like when Steve Staios spoke to the media after the deadline that, he says they were more aggressive than that. They were trying to do things. So I guess it wasn't for any lack of effort, but just not a lot out there. And look, we've talked about it before. The cupboards are not well stocked right now in Ottawa as far as prospects go, right? Like, all these young guys that they got out of their rebuild are already here and already in the lineup, with the exception of Carter Yakimchuk, who is not ready, and I wouldn't have traded him either. Like, barring some major swing, like some star with term, I would have allowed that guy to stay in the minors and continue to develop. And obviously, that's what's going to happen. But your Sandersons and your Stutzlas and your, Brady's on a slightly different time frame than the Shane Pinto. Like, these are all guys. It's still a young core, but there's not a whole lot of groundswell behind them. There's been some mistakes in the Dorian draft, certainly towards the end of his tenure. That means there's not a whole lot to trade to go for it this year. And I certainly have time for the argument that the East is wide open. So if the Sens could get in, maybe they're as likely as anybody else, as a Detroit, as an Islanders, as a Pittsburgh, to go a couple of rounds. Like, I have time for that discussion. I just think when you have so little ammunition to fire, when you're sitting outside the playoffs and it's taking this long just to get caught back up, I'm not sure I would have spent it this year. And so they didn't. But I did sort of have a keen eye on them all day, waiting to see if there would be one more thing, if they would take one more shot at. And as I said, Steve Staios suggested it wasn't for lack of trying. But at the end of the day, it is not Graham Clark is coming back. That was sort of, man, it felt like trades dropped really, really late. That cue that they always tell you, stick around after 3 o'clock. Sometimes more trades trickle in after the buzzer. And man, it felt like that carried on for hours this time. Normally, it sort of feels like by 3:45, 3:50 at the latest, it's done, and everybody kind of gets they're done. The press conferences, everything are going on. Things trickled out till like 5 o'clock. One of the very late ones was the Sens picking up this Graham Clark kid, who I won't pretend to know anything about, but that was really their only further action, and it's probably the right approach. At least in my mind, as I said. You're close enough that you don't pull the carpet out from underneath your guys, but not close enough that you go all in trying to, bring in significant additions that are going to cost you pieces that, frankly, you don't have. Is it possible to be not at all surprised and yet super disappointed at the same time? Because that is sort of how I would frame my feelings about the Leafs today. Look, I don't know how long I've been sitting here saying this, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Brad Treliving is not a good general manager. And today, it cost you. I've also been saying Craig Berube is not a particularly good coach, or at least not the right coach for this group. And today that cost you too. Somehow, when you weren't even on the ice. And yet, like, when you go into it and you go, man, they're in a bad spot. And, man, we've got the wrong guy at the helm trying to make the deals today. So you're sort of going into it being like, this is probably not going to go that well. But you're hoping for more. You're like, maybe he can surprise me. Maybe prices get crazy. And so you end up getting more than you expect. All of that kind of thing you allow to get in your head. And you come out of it and you're like, oh, I didn't expect you to be any good at this. And somehow you were still a letdown. Like, I look around and it doesn't happen until the very last. Look, we can talk about the Nicolas Waugh trade on Thursday for a first-round pick. That's fine. I think it sucks that it came to that. I think it sucks that Coach Craig Berube gets to sit there and say, well, we didn't get as much offense out of him as we would have liked. Hey, how about you stop pairing him with Dakota Joshua? What did you think was going to happen? I'm not sitting here telling you that Nicolas Waugh should have been on like in your top six or playing second. But you can't bury the guy in the defensive zone, give him shit line mates, and then be like, we really hoped he would have produced some more points. And I'm sitting here like, I was fine with the defensive zone usage. That is the way I would have used Nick Waugh. But I'm not going to bury him on the way out the door afterwards and go, you didn't score. Yeah, no shit. He started every shift in the defensive zone. And again, to me, that's defensible. But why you roasting him afterwards? So I imagine, because he also spent most of his defensive zone faceoffs on Simon Benoit's defensive pair. So it's not even like you had somebody, if you won the puck back to them, that was going to help you break it out and get out on the rush or anything like that. So when I say that the coach helped devalue our guys and get you less, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Because Nick Waugh, perfectly capable third-line player in Vegas, he's about to become, well, I would have said a perfectly capable third-line guy in Colorado until they reach out and grab Kadri again, which will push him down to fourth line, which he's absolutely capable of doing. But when I looked at that to start, and I wasn't even sure if they would trade Waugh, you get a first, and I think it was a conditional fifth or whatever out of that one. You're like, yeah, fair enough. Not a bad start. But it never took off from there. You traded Bobby McMahon for a second and a fourth. There's hardly any impact forwards out there. This guy who skates well, shoots well, loves to forecheck, and is going to be making like $1.5 million. And if you want to, you can retain. You can take that down to $750,000 for a team who might need, the guy to come in even cheaper. Leafs are swimming in cap space. Have all 3 retention spots. You can retain to the end of the year on that. Nah. You get a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick. The second-round pick is not until next year. Neither is the first-round pick that you got for Nick Waugh the day before. And the one that really fucking irks me, perhaps more than the rest, is Scott Laughton gets a conditional third from the LA Kings. Now, that third-round pick can turn into a second-round pick if LA makes the playoffs. But LA spent the rest of the week selling. Warren Fogle out the door. Corey Perry out the door. Corey Perry, by the way, the corpse of Corey Perry, the 40-year-old half-alive Corey Perry, got a second-round pick out of Tampa. And useful bottom six center who can still penalty kill and is much better skater, much younger, he gets a third. This is awful. Awful asset management. The Leafs traded a first and a useful bottom six player that was reasonably popular in the fan base last year in Grebenkin to Philadelphia to get Scott Laughton. The coach immediately plunks him in as your fourth line center, tanks his value, gives him like no opportunity to do anything. And I'm not one of these people who says he should have been given a chance to skate in the top six or whatever else. But you played him with fucking Calle Yarncroke and Steven Lorentz all year. What do you think was going to happen? You traded a first-round pick and a young prospect for a perfectly capable third-line player, tanked the shit out of his value, playing him on your fourth line with no help, and turned him into a player that was only worth a third-round pick in exactly one calendar year. What the fuck? Disaster. And when he was asked exactly that, how did this happen? How did you spend that much to get him a year ago and only get this for him a year later? He goes, well, the market dictates. You're the market, motherfucker. You're the only one in the world who offered Grebenkin and a first for Laughton a year ago and couldn't get anything more out this year. Nick Dowd was traded from Washington, a legit, actual fourth-line center. He gets a second and a third for Washington. Scott Laughton is only worth a conditional third? You're terrible at this. So I don't know if the general manager just doesn't talk to the coach. Didn't talk to him last year at the deadline and said, hey, gonna go get Scott Laughton. What do you think of that guy? And had the coach said, I don't like him, fourth line on my team at best, then you don't make the trade. Didn't talk to him again coming down the stretch when you realize you're dead and buried. You're going to be selling at the deadline. Hey, we need you to showcase Laughton a little more. Play him up a little more. Give him a couple more opportunities here and there. Try and put some shine on him. Nope, didn't have that conversation either. Just let him sit there and sour on the fourth line. And by all accounts, a great team guy, a guy everybody loved. I liked him. Former Oshawa General captain. Was happy to see him wear the Leaf. Now just another regrettable fucking chapter with these two geniuses at the helm. I don't know, man. Nothing else gets done. Like I said, you have all three retention slots. You can hold salary on anybody. And you're not creative with it at all. You did nothing with it. You couldn't get somebody to take Calle Yarncroke and get you a 6th round pick. You'd have had to pay him like $150,000 with what's left on the season, your ability to retain. Obviously, we got Domi back in the middle now. That's a fucking disaster. Carlo's still here. OEL still here. Riley's still here, although I always expected if he's going anywhere, that would be over the summer. Just zero plan, zero creativity. Like, you talk about this organization and their ability to look down the road at all. We went just over the last week. Easton Cowan did not go to the Marlies during the Olympic break. You can sit around because we believe it's better for you to develop here in the NHL. Back from the Olympics, Easton Cowan, healthy scratch. All right. Easton Cowan in the lineup on the fourth line plays 8 minutes. All right. To Easton Cowan on the top line for 2 straight games with Matthews and Nylander. What is the plan? You have no idea what you're doing with this guy night to night. Healthy scratch, fourth liner, top liner. There is no concept here between this coach and this general manager of what we should be doing, what's best for this kid's anyway, that's a whole other thing. But it's a perfect example over the course of 1 week. Not good enough to be in my lineup. Fine, I'll play him, but only on the fourth line I guess I'll put him on the top line. You have no idea what you're doing. No idea. No ability to use all the cap space you got. No idea how to use the retention. Like, just zero creativity. You got walked, man. You can look around at Corey Perry, Nick Dowd, fucking Michael McCarron gets a better return than Scott Laughton? Are you serious? If I can take you back in time, kids. Back in my day on the schoolyard, used to play Pog. Used to play marbles. You'd always see if you could find some dumbass kid that would play you his best possible Pog for your shittiest one. His best possible marble for your shittiest one. You'd look around on the schoolyard for that kid. I can beat that kid. I'm going to take his best. That's Brad Treliving. Everybody else out there making reasonable trades, getting pieces in return. I'll circle by Toronto, see if I can rob them blind. Fuck. And you can. And the worst part of it, honestly, if I can stop being so snarky, and I probably can't, none of the picks you got, none of the good ones. Like I said, the Scott Laughton 3rd round pick could turn into a 2nd round pick if LA makes the playoffs. But they're currently out of the playoffs, and they looked much more like sellers today than buyers. But the 2nd round pick you got for Bobby McMahon and the 1st round pick you got for Nick Waugh are in 2027. So you're nowhere closer to what you're going to do next year. Like, I guess, in theory, if you're any good at all next year, which at the moment you've done nothing to convince me is likely, you could trade those picks at the deadline next year. But you need to be improving now. You needed young players now. You needed prospects now. And failing any ability to get that, which you showed, you need picks now. So that one of two things can happen. They can start to contribute to your lineup, which badly needs young players soon, or if we are headed down to the very dark place that it looks like we're headed, and Nylander and Matthews are going to be this rebuild can be shorter. It starts sooner because you get these guys this June, not next June. So you didn't get picks this year. You didn't get young players this year. You didn't get prospects this year. You got draft picks for maybe later if you don't trade them. And this GM, I know what he's fucking going to do. Just a horrible, I don't know. Myrtle had on his Twitter, give today or the deadline period a letter grade, A, B, C, or F. I would have gone D, but apparently they don't give you that many options on Twitter. So I did give them a C. You got picks. You got something for the expiring UFAs. I should have given an F. Fuck this. I would have given a D if that had been listed. Because while you did do it, you weren't creative. You didn't do it well. You didn't fleece anybody. In fact, you got fleeced. I should have given the F. Like it was better than nothing, but you could tell at the end they had talked themselves. None of these or neither of these deals today came until the very, very, very last second. So you could tell it was fine. Just give us something. Give me anything. As opposed to having a plan. And I'm not crazy. I'm not sitting here saying all these guys should have gotten you a first and a prospect. I'm saying you got to get more for Scott Laughton than Washington got for Nick Dowd. For Michael McCarron. For Corey fucking Perry. What the hell? How are you this bad at it? And like I said, it all fits together. It all fits together. You make bad deals. You give them to a coach who doesn't know how to use these players. He devalues them, and then you turn around and make shit deals for them because they don't have the value that they should anymore. And you're certainly not capable of negotiating somebody into overpaying. So like I said, I never thought, I've said it on this show before, that they need a retool. Competent management can get you back into the playoff conversation next year, but that this is not that management. So I was not expecting home runs today. I was hoping, certainly, for home runs today, but I was not expecting home runs today. And yet somehow they came up even short of that. Not a young body in the door, not a prospect in the door, nothing in the door that's going to play for you next year when you supposedly hope to contend again. Fuck. Couple of interesting things around the rest of the league. I'm a little surprised Montreal was as quiet as they were. I think I said on the Monday show that they shouldn't have felt pressured to do anything. Certainly last year, when they arrived earlier than most expected, I certainly would not have blown my brains out, last year. Because sometimes you got to make sure, are we actually arriving or have we arrived a little early? What's going on, right? But this year, you're here for a second straight year, and you're here despite pretty mediocre goaltending. I thought they might have looked to address that. Certainly everybody's been talking about the idea of a second-line center. They stay quiet and stay patient. I don't hate it, but I am a little surprised by it. I thought Detroit, I didn't really know what to expect out of Detroit. Justin Falk is a guy. But when you've seen Buffalo roar into the picture, when you've seen Tampa be as good as they've been, and they didn't do a ton either. I thought they might do more, but they do go out and get Corey Perry, a guy they're familiar with. I thought Detroit might be a little more active, and it's the same reason for a lot. Like, the East is not scary. It's just a lot of, like, you could convince me right now that Buffalo will play in the conference final this year with how hot they've been. You could also talk me into them being out in 5 games in the first round, just not having enough experience and whatever. I don't know who's doing that to them because there's going to be a lot of inexperienced teams in the playoffs this year. But I mean, I guess. Point being, I don't know how great they're going to be in the playoffs. I don't know how great Detroit's going to be in the playoffs. I don't know how great Montreal is going to be in the playoffs. I assume Tampa will be great. I don't know why I assume that. They keep getting their asses kicked by Florida, but Florida ain't going to be around to do that to them. Carolina seems to have a 2 rounds and out philosophy, which is 1 round better than the philosophy my team, I was going to say has, but they seem to have adjusted that philosophy to no rounds and out. But on the are you really scared of Pittsburgh this year? Are you really scared of the Islanders this year? Columbus is hanging around. I don't know. So there's sort of this competing argument of like, do we throw everything into this because it's wide open right now and let's see if we can make this happen for us this year and push through a weak East? Or is there kind of this, we don't have to do that. The East is soft enough that let's just take a shot at it. Or I don't know how real we are if you're Buffalo or Detroit. Do we blow our brains out and just find out when we get there, oh shit, we're not actually ready for this? So that was interesting. I thought Tampa would do more. I certainly thought Detroit would do more. I thought Buffalo did. I kind of liked how aggressive they were trying to get Parayko. He wouldn't waive his no-move clause, so he doesn't end up there. They do turn around and go get Luke Shen and Logan Stanley, which is similar style, but not as good. But it does sure up their right side a little bit, I suppose. I don't know. It was interesting. In the West, Dallas goes and get Tyler Myers. That's not doing much for me. Minnesota was active. I don't know what it is. They've been hot as hell since they got Quinn Hughes. I still don't believe them. I don't think they're real. I think Colorado takes them down quick. I think Dallas takes them down quick. At the moment, that's the one that looks to be the matchup, right? Dallas versus Minnesota. I'll take Dallas. Like, you look at what Minnesota's got up the middle. It's Ryan Hartman. It's Joel Eriksson-Ek. It's Michael McCarron. Like, it's just guys. That matters in the playoffs. So I don't think they get by Dallas or Colorado. But I admire them for at least taking a shot at it. But I don't think the West is as wide open. I mean, the Pacific certainly is. I was looking today. Anaheim's in second place in the fucking Pacific. I did pick them earlier in the year to, like, get hot and be around and maybe make the playoffs. Fuck, the Pacific's bad, man. Speaking of which, it got a little bit worse when Calgary shipped out Nazem Kadri to Colorado, sent him home. I mentioned there a little while ago. I'm really happy for Naz. I think that's cool. Calgary gets a first-round pick out of it. Victor Olofsson, who's supposed to be a scoring winger, who sometimes forgets to score. There was a couple other picks involved. I don't have it all right in front of me. But Calgary did right by Naz. It sounded like it was really important to Naz to do well by the Flames. He was happy there. He had been a leader there. By all accounts, they had treated him well, had given him the good contract, the big contract. And he didn't want it, to look like he was anxious to get out of town, right? Like, just trade me anywhere. I don't want to be here anymore. By all accounts, he was worried about that perception. But I think when it is to go back to Colorado, where he had so much success, where he clearly fit in, I think he avoids that look. And they interviewed him on TSN after the trade. And it came in, again, one of these very, very, very late ones. It apparently happened at the last second. And he sounded over the moon. Like, go back to the best team in the league who has Brock Nelson and Nate McKinnon and now Nick Waugh and himself up the middle. That's fucking elite. And I don't really know how Colorado pulled it off. They did manage to get Calgary to eat 20%, which by all accounts they didn't want to do. There's still a couple years left on that deal. But I like that a lot for Colorado. In terms of just winners and losers, right? Colorado was already perhaps the favorite to win the Cup, and they add Nazem Kadri and Nick Waugh. Man, they will be a tough out this year in the West. Anaheim adds John Carlson. I didn't see that coming at all, but I do admire the fact that your guys have done, even in a weak division, what like all that you could ask them to do. They're sitting there in second place. No one thought they would be this high up. Go get them some help. Like, go get out there and see if you can provide a little bit of something, a little bit of stability on the right side. I don't expect it to be long-term. Like, I don't think John Carlson's going to stay there. I believe that one broke after I had gone to bed Thursday night. When I saw it Friday morning, I was kind of a double take. Like, is there another John Carlson? Like, those are two pretty common names, right? John Carlson. There's got to be. No, it's that fucking guy. So good for them. You know, I like that. Carolina, as I sort of circle around just in my head, didn't do much. Nick Delorier, like, I guess, go get yourself a face puncher if you think that's what you need, but it wasn't what they need. But maybe it's what I said earlier. Maybe they don't think they need anything more to get out of what is looking like a pretty soft East. But if I was them and I had taken this many runs at it with this group and this coach, I might have not sat back this year. I might have seen this soft East and got, this is our chance. I wouldn't say last chance, but certainly one of our last chances. Maybe we go out and find a way to get Kadri done, right? Something like that. But they choose to stand pat and don't make any significant additions other than a face puncher for some reason. And that's that. Anyway, a bummer of a deadline day, just in terms of quality, right? Last year, like I said, so much happened, man. And a lot of people are blaming the new salary cap rules, the playoff salary cap rules, the double retention rules. It's probably all tied in there, but everybody said that was going to happen. Like, be careful what you wish for when you put that shit in the CBA. It'll stall trades. And look, it stalled trades. So, all of that just ahead of what is supposed to be a fairly lackluster free agent class this July 1st. And a rising salary cap. That means teams do not have to let their guys walk, right? Teams have cap space to just keep their guys and stop them from getting to free agency. So we could be entering a pretty new era here where, if you can believe it, player movement is even more limited than it has been for the last little while around the league, which kind of sucks. Nobody has more fun at their trade deadline than the NBA, and the NHL couldn't be more polar opposite. But that's where we'll wrap this one up. I'm sure Rob will have some thoughts on the deadline on Monday as well. Plus, we'll be into the WBC by then. The Sens will have played again. We'll have, I assume, seen Warren Fogle make his debut. But we'll see what else has happened by the Monday morning show with Rob. Plus, stick around here over the next week or so at some point. When the mood strikes, we will drop that third episode with Joshua O'Connor as well. If you've missed those ones, there's two of them up already. One dropped on Wednesday talking about his work as a cameraman shooting the World Juniors and the women's under 18s. And then the Thursday edition was, hey, what's wrong with the CFL? We asked a guy who worked in that league for a very long time there, and Joshua O'Connor. So check those out at tallcanaudio.com or wherever you're hearing me right now. That'll do it for tonight. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you on Monday.